A mafia boss was seconds away from walking out in fury, until a waitress stopped him with bread, olive oil, and one sentence from a dead language. The room thought it was witnessing a miracle. It wasn't. It was the first crack in a 20-year lie, because the girl they treated like furniture was actually the daughter of the man everyone thought had betrayed the family. And she had the proof to bury the real rat alive.
Heels. Turn the lights down and picture this. The old man moves with sudden, violent grace. One moment, a full glass of wine. The next, shattered glass on marble, and a waiter pinned against the wall by a merciless grip. The gilded obsidian falls dead silent. Heels. Security freezes. Billionaires forget how to breathe. But you and I are going to watch the shadows. Only one person steps forward. A quiet, invisible waitress holding a simple bread basket. Heels. She opens her mouth and breathes life into a dialect dead for 40 years. Stay with me, because the tragedy we are unpacking tonight runs deep. Heels. We all want to belong somewhere. The gilded obsidian was never just a dining room. It was a brutal mirror reflecting your exact worth in the city's underworld food chain. And Elena Rossi? She knew her place was at the very bottom. Heels. She existed merely to serve the powerful, forever unseen. She drifted through that opulent space like a sorrowful ghost, swallowed by a baggy uniform. She let her dark hair fall over her eyes, a deliberate shield against a world that only brings pain. Heels. She was a fading memory, choosing to be a shadow just to survive the night. Heels. 23 years spent mastering the art of vanishing. Then, reality bites back. Her manager, Arthur, snaps at her, demanding water and bread, barking at her to lift her heavy eyes from the floor. He grips her shoulder hard enough to leave a deep bruise. Heels. Yet she refuses to flinch. Enduring the pain is always safer. Then comes the chilling news. The Moretti family arrives in 20 minutes. He shoves her away with a dark threat. If she slips up tonight, she will not just lose her job. Heels. In a city ruled by blood, she will be erased entirely. Heels. She simply whispers yes. Arthur bans her from the VIP section entirely, handing the Moretti table to the polished servers instead. He stares at her bare face and unkempt hair, cruelly mocking her lack of grace, ordering her to remain an unseen phantom. Heels. Elena nods, swallowing her pride in absolute silence. But Arthur is blind to her true nature. He does not understand the agonizing wisdom she carries. In a room overflowing with ruthless predators and dangerous syndicate bosses, Heels. Blending into the cold background is not weakness. It is the only way a fragile soul makes it out alive. Heels. She takes her pitcher and retreats into the dim shadows, retreating to the safety she has practiced since she was 7 years old. Behind the swinging doors, the kitchen has lost its warmth. The usually loud cooks are gripped by a terrifying silence. Heels. Benoit, the head chef, clings to the steel counter, pale and trembling. He locks eyes with Elena and whispers through his heavy accent. It is not just the sun arriving tonight. The ultimate shadow is descending. The patriarch. Heels. Don Salvatore Moretti is finally coming. Heels. Time stands completely still in the kitchen. A frightened line cook whispers that he thought the old man was exiled in Sicily or on his deathbed. Benoit wipes the cold sweat from his brow. Men like Salvatore Moretti do not just pass away. Heels, he murmurs. They simply prepare to rule whatever hell awaits them. Panic sets in. Benoit warns that a single misplaced grain of salt or a clumsy water pour could mean a death sentence. Amidst the terror, Elena peacefully lifts a silver tray. Heels. Do not pour his drink with your left hand, she says softly. The room stops, she repeats it. The Don despises the left hand. Heels. It is an ancient superstition, she murmurs. The left hand belongs to the devil. She urges them to warn the server. Benoit stares, bewildered, asking how a ghost like her knows such heavy secrets. Elena shrugs. Heels. Offering a hollow lie about reading history books. But the tragic truth was buried deep inside her. She remembered her grandmother murmuring these dark fables in a cold Brooklyn apartment, speaking a forgotten dialect meant for ghosts. Heels. She remembered every agonizing detail she desperately wished to bury. Stepping back into the dining room, she witnesses the chilling ripple effect. The wealthy patrons are scattering into the night. Heels. Tech moguls and finance titans flee long before the final course. Heels. Let's pause and look at this power dynamic together. When the true predator enters the forest, the lesser creatures simply vanish. It goes beyond mere fear. It is the raw, primal instinct to survive. You do not share the same air as the patriarch. Heels. Elena quietly clears plates in the back, her eyes locked on those heavy doors. A suffocating knot tightens in her chest. It is a sorrow far deeper than panic, the echoes of her grandmother's sorrowful warnings clawing at her mind. Heels. From across the empty floor, Arthur snaps his fingers, fiercely commanding her to disappear. Obediently, she melts back into the cold sanctuary of the shadows, becoming one with the dark wood. Heels. She dissolves into the very architecture. It is the tragic gift of the unseen. Precisely at 8, the heavy oak doors groan open. 4 silent enforcers step through, ignoring the pleasantries and the menus. Their dead eyes sweep the room. Heels. Calculating exits and measuring the breath of every patron. Satisfied with the silence, they part. Then Lorenzo Moretti steps into the light. He is towering, carrying a suffocating gravity that forces the room to its knees. Dressed in midnight navy, heels. His features are agonizingly sharp and hopelessly cold. It is the devastating presence of a man born into darkness, a captivating tragedy you simply cannot look away from. Heels. He moves without a single doubt, carrying himself as if the very earth was carved for his footsteps. But the true horror lies beside him. The room is not trembling for Lorenzo. They are paralyzed by the frail figure leaning heavily on his arm. Heels. Don Salvatore Moretti is a fraction of his son's towering height. Time has violently withered him, bending his spine and carving deep sorrows into his face. Hidden beneath a dark fedora and heavy cashmere, he leans on a carved wooden cane. Heels. But make no mistake, that cane is nothing more than theater. Everyone breathing knows the devastating truth. Heels. This fragile old man once destroyed a life with his bare hands on a crowded street in 1979, sipping his espresso as the blood pooled. His suffocating presence feels like an approaching storm. The entire dining hall surrenders. Heels. Conversations die. Silverware rests. Lungs forget how to draw air. The silence is so profound, Elena can feel the tragic weight of it pressing against her skull. Rushing forward, Arthur bows so low he practically scrapes the floor. Heels. He desperately offers his pathetic praises, whispering that it is the ultimate honor to welcome the Moretti bloodline, promising their sanctuary is prepared. Heels. He swears the night will be flawless. Salvatore ignores him entirely. The old man merely grunts, his cane striking the marble in a slow, agonizing heartbeat. Lorenzo offers the manager a single, heels, freezing nod, a gesture of politeness masking a promise of violence. Is the table ready? Lorenzo murmurs. Arthur scrambles, swearing it is the most secure haven in the building. Lorenzo quietly commands him to lead. As they move, heels. Elena watches from her dark refuge. Her eyes trace Salvatore's weirdly steps. She studies the deliberate grip on the wooden cane, recognizing that this broken man holds on to power, not balance. Heels. She watches his dark, hollow eyes sweep the room. It is not the gaze of a frightened man, but a king surveying his stolen kingdom. Elena feels a haunting familiarity in his stride, not from her own memories, but from the ghosts of her past. Heels. Her grandmother used to sit with cheap wine at 2 in the morning, whispering that Salvatore walked as if the entire underworld rested on his ruined shoulders. Every step was a tragic debt being collected. Elena grips her pitcher, heels, begging herself to look away. But you and I have both been paralyzed by a train wreck, haven't we? She simply cannot look away. The Moretti family finally descends upon their table. Heels. The enforcers secure the perimeter like a silent army. Lorenzo takes his rightful place beside his aging father, a tragic prince bound to a dark throne. The table is immaculate, yet in a cruel twist of fate, Arthur sends Chad to serve them. Heels. Chad is a naive young man, entirely blind to the bloody rules of the Sicilian underworld. He carries a bright, foolish energy. Heels. Completely oblivious to the ancient monsters sitting before him, men who built empires of bone long before he took his first breath. From the shadows, Elena watches this innocent lamb walk straight toward the slaughter. Heels. Chad beams with a painful smile. "Good evening," he chirps. "Can I pour some sparkling water?" A fate knot removed his hat. In their dark world, no one speaks until the patriarch uncovers his head. It is a silent law of blood. Lorenzo's jaw tightens, brutal violence simmering under his skin. Salvatore simply stares at the waiter in agonizing silence, looking at the innocent kid not as a human, but as a broken toy making a sound that needs to end. Heels. Chad is drowning in panic. But Lorenzo a weak apology. But Lorenzo coldly cuts him off, demanding still water and list, yet actually trying to push him his own wave. "Do I look like I drink Pinot Noir?" He does not shout. He whispers it, a quiet sound carrying him decades of ruthless weight. Chad goes pale, trembling. The crime boss simply raises a hand, dismissing him. The manager drags the kid away, spitting curses, banishing him into the night. Heels. They send in Dominic, a veteran who supposedly knows how to navigate VIP mobsters. He steps up, pouring the water, but he pours from the left. Watching from the shadows, Elena physically aches, knowing the violent storm about to break. Salvatore's hand snaps out, locking around the man's wrist with water shatters across the table. The Don growls that in his house, you pour with the right hand. The left belongs to the devil. Dominic freezes, begging for forgiveness. Heels. Dominic stammers some excuse about restaurant policy. A fatal error. Salvatore drops the wrist in pure disgust. He spits out, warning them he is no clueless tourist. Lorenzo reaches out, desperate to soothe his father's bleeding pride, but the Mafia boss is far gone. He rises, his heavy baritone echoing off the walls. He damns the place as plastic, empty, devoid of true respect. Fake respect, he roars, is a hollow grave. Behind him, the syndicate bodyguards shift, entirely ready for war. Heels. You and I both know the scent of a room turning deadly. The manager stands paralyzed. Hidden steel slides into the hands of mob enforcers. Ordinary diners hold their breath, prey locked in a cage with a wounded predator. Salvatore is turning to leave, a departure promising blood. But Elena moves. Stripping away her fear, she slips into the back kitchen. She claims the cheap, rustic staff bread hidden from wealthy patrons, grabbing a simple bottle of olive oil off the cold prep shelf. Heels. No useless truffle oil, just raw, earthly truth. She steps into the heavy silence, her shoes clicking like a metronome. Her manager glares with pure nothing now. She is answering a deeper call. A massive syndicate enforcer suddenly blocks her path, built like a brick wall, wearing a vicious scar and the heavy hands of a killer. He stands between her and the grieving boss, fully prepared to end a young waitress over a simple basket of warm bread. Heels. Elena pauses, offering a slight tilt of her head. Not surrender, just profound underworld respect. She softly murmurs she brought bread for the Don. The enforcer studies her. No weapons, no shaking hands, just an ocean of calm. 3 agonizing seconds pass before he steps aside. Elena walks straight to the table. Lorenzo immediately locks his dark eyes on her. He knows the look of women chasing money, but her soul carries a completely different gravity. Heels. She stands center stage, yet seems to crave the shadows. That paradox hooks Lorenzo instantly. Meanwhile, Salvatore stews in his dark fury, practically breathing fire to start a street war. Elena ignores the heavily armed guards. Heels. She ignores the dangerous sun. Her gaze anchors entirely on the broken boss. She sets the rustic bread down like a bloodline peace offering. Pouring the oil, she reaches over and shifts his wineglass exactly 3 inches, aligning it with his knife. Heels, a quiet, devastating display of power. Heels. The manager groans in the shadows, waiting for the blood to spill. Elena folds her trembling hands, taking one deep breath before risking everything. The tension hangs like a thick fog. She knows this is either her salvation or her last breath. Bowing her head, she speaks the phrase, Vucenza beneda don turi, pani e cauru. This isn't modern Italian. It is a buried mountain dialect, sung by forgotten peasants to soothe the violent mob lords of another lifetime. Heels. It means, bless me, the bread is warm, eat and forget your sorrows. The shift in the room is haunting. Salvatore's rage simply evaporates. The ruthless crime boss looks utterly paralyzed, caught between shock and a deep, agonizing vulnerability. Heels. To see this hardened killer completely unravel is deeply unsettling. He sinks into his chair, staring at Elena as if she walked out of a grave. Lorenzo goes rigid. Heels. Watching a lowly waitress deliver a sacred phrase meant only for the ghosts of elite mafia legends. Heels. Stick with me here, because a suffocating silence claims the room. What did you say? Salvatore whispers. The terrifying aura of the boss vanishes, leaving only a deeply broken father. Elena speaks again, matching the exact heels. Mournful rhythm her grandmother passed down, holding the syllables like fragile glass. She warns him softly that cold bread and hot anger invite the devil. Salvatore reaches for her, his calloused hand trembling violently. He stops inches away, heels, fearing she will fade into smoke. His heavy voice cracks, begging to know who taught her those buried words. Heels. My grandmother taught me, Elena answers. She switches to English but keeps that haunting ancient cadence. Then, she delivers a devastating truth. She tells him it is the only language meant for God, and for men who believe they are God. Heels. The silence in the restaurant completely transforms. The terror is gone, replaced by a heavy, ancient reverence. Lorenzo exhales sharply. He stares at this girl in a cheap uniform offering broken bread. For the first time, Feels the calculated mob air is entirely lost in the dark, and he is mesmerized. Feels. The mighty Salvatore Moretti sounds like a drowning man pulling for air. What was her name? He asks. Elena stands on the razor edge of her life. She could lie, vanish into the city, and keep her ghost story buried, and sees a man rotting from a lifetime of grief. The agony pulls at her soul, so she surrenders the truth. Grazia, she whispers, Grazia Vitali. That name detonates through the silent room. The grieving Dawn grips the heavy oak table just to stay upright. Heals. The blood entirely drains from his face. Grazia, he repeats, his mind tumbling 50 years into the dark. The baker's daughter who vanished in 1974. Elena stands perfectly still. She tells him directly, she never vanished. Heals. She ran to Brooklyn, baked bread for 3 decades, and passed away 3 years ago. She had lived this moment in her nightmares, never expecting it to breathe. Then a single tear falls from Salvatore's eye. Heals. Watching the ultimate crime lord weep in front of his lethal soldiers is a beautiful, terrifying tragedy. Heals. Lorenzo, the cold underboss, is entirely shaken by his father's tears. The earth has shifted beneath them. Salvatore takes the rustic bread, tearing the crust exactly the way Elena's grandmother used to. He dips it in the golden oil, tasting it, Heals, whispering that it tastes like home. He is conversing with the dead. Suddenly his dark eyes snap open, locking onto the trembling manager. The ruthless boss returns, radiating fierce protection. You, he growls. This girl serves no one tonight. Heals. She eats with my family. Heals. Arthur stumbles over his words, nervously citing policies about staff sitting with patrons. Lorenzo slowly turns. He doesn't raise his voice. He simply murmurs, Arthur, my father just invited a lady to dinner. Are you telling him no? The manager shrinks into a ghost and retreats. Lorenzo quietly tells Elena to sit. She stands paralyzed. The heavy reality of the vendetta she just awoke is crashing down. She stepped out of the shadows, invoked the sacred dialect, and whispered a name buried in blood. Heals. The door back to her old life is nailed shut. She mutters something about finishing her shift, but Lorenzo stands. Up close, the young heir is a towering shadow, smelling of bitter tobacco and quiet violence. He draws back the chair beside his father. He is not asking. Lowering his voice until it vibrates in her chest, he whispers, Elena, nobody refuses Don Salvatore. His gaze cuts right through her. No cheap charm. No hollow games. Just a pure, dark obsession taking root, pulling her into the deep end. Heals. It is a quiet, deadly curiosity, far more terrifying than a gun. Lorenzo leans close, questioning how a young Manhattan waitress speaks a dead Sicilian dialect from 1942. Elena stares at the empty chair. Her survival relies on reading the darkness, and sitting with this crime syndicate seals her fate. Yet she glances back at the aging Don. He watches her like a priceless memory dragged from the ashes, completely terrified that she might simply fade away. Feels. She unties her apron, letting it fall, and takes her seat beside Don Salvatore. A collective, fearful gasp sweeps the dining room. Lorenzo sits closely, pouring a vintage wine that costs more than her life, his dark eyes studying her every breath. Feels. Meanwhile, a light returns to Salvatore's hollow face. The crushing grief lifts. He leans in, desperate to know about her grandmother's kitchen. He asks if she remembers the harvest songs that echoed through their hidden village, Heals, long before the streets ran red. Heals. He asks how Grazia dried tomatoes under the Mediterranean sun. As Elena answers, the mask falls away. Speaking the rhythm of the old country, she is no longer invisible. Ben Grazia Vitali's flesh and blood, a name carrying the weight of Lorenzo. Lorenzo. He has been silent, dissecting her every syllable like a predator, mapping out a hunt. Swirling his dark wine, he levels that cold, calculated stare that strips a soul down to its terrible core. Heals. So Grazia runs in 1974, he says, testing her defenses. My father was a crime family soldier then. People did not just vanish from the valley without a reason. Elena insists she only wanted a fresh start. Heals. Lorenzo offers this terribly heavy, patient smile. That is a lie, he murmurs. But you have beautiful eyes when you lie, so I will let it slide. She fiercely defends her truth. He slams his glass onto the table. Grazia did not run from boredom. Heals. She ran because she saw, knew, or stole something. Heals. Women did not just run. They ran because staying meant a quiet funeral. The Don growls Lorenzo's name, a heavy paternal warning. But Lorenzo leans closer, dissecting her soul. That greeting you used, that is not Baker slang. That is the blood-bound code of the inner circle. The old families used it to speak directly through federal wiretaps, while the cops heard nothing. Elena digs her fingers into the tablecloth, her heart violently hammering in her chest. Feels. A baker's daughter might remember old farm songs. Lorenzo presses, searching the shadows in her eyes. But she does not know the formal respect code for a Don. Who are you really? Just then, the tension shatters. The heavy front doors do not open, they practically burst inward. It is a violent, deeply offensive intrusion. 6 towering Russian enforcers wrapped in leather crash straight into this sacred, heavily guarded dining room. Feels. You and I have seen this tragedy before. We know the storm that follows. At the center stands Dmitry Vulov, a mountain of a man daring the room to breathe. He sweeps his gaze, locking onto the patriarch's table with a hollow, venomous smile.
He echoes.
I did not realize you returned to dine with the help. His cold eyes trace Elena with suffocating intent. Slowly, Lorenzo stands. He rises not like a man, but like a drawn blade waiting to taste blood. Feels. He buttons his jacket with painful deliberation. Dmitri, Lorenzo says, his tone perfectly hollow. Interrupting my father while he eats is a severe health risk. Vulov chuckles, his enforcers fanning out as the Moretti soldiers step from the shadows. Feels. The very air in the room goes cold. Then Vulov reaches for Elena's hair. Lorenzo's hand clamps onto Vulov's wrist. The sickening grind of bone echoes in the silence. Touch her, Lorenzo whispers, his voice breaking with tragic tenderness. Feels. And you lose the hand, then the arm, then your life. Feels. Rage flares in Vulov's eyes. He pulls against the grip, but Lorenzo is anchored in silent fury. Protecting a waitress, you have gone soft. Slowly, Don Salvatore rises. He may bear the weight of years, but he carries the heavy sorrow of a man who stopped bluffing decades ago. She is no waitress. Salvatore one table. She carries Sicilian blood. He gazes deeply into Elena's soul, and right there, a generational tragedy is reborn. Feels. Now visualize the sheer weight of this moment. Breaking the heavy silence, Elena murmurs an ancient underworld proverb. He who disturbs the bread dies of hunger. The words slip out wrapped in sorrow and steel. Salvatore freezes, feels, entirely disarmed by the ghost of the past. Then an old, cruel shadow returns to his face. Exactly, he whispers to Vulov. He gestures to his men. Remove this filth from my sight. In beautiful, terrible unison, feels. The Moretti guards raise their weapons, emotionless men executing the grim mechanics of syndicate life. Feels. Vulov measures the drawn steel, glances at his men, and reads his own obituary in the math. He tears his arm from Loren's grip, keeping a venomous, unbroken stare. The mask of civility burns away, leaving only the promise of a blood feud. Feels. This is far from over, Moretti. Vulov seethes. His finger shifts, pinning Elena in place. And you, little girl. You just chose the grave. He retreats into the unforgiving city night. As the doors seal shut, a suffocating, feels, breathless silence drowns the room for 3 agonizing seconds. Feels. Slowly the air returns to their lungs. Lorenzo sinks back into his chair, his eyes piercing through her defenses. He carries the restless paranoia born into mob airs, but now a dark respect softens his gaze. You know the old ways, he murmurs softly. Feels. Who taught you that? Elena stares down, burdened by her history. My father, Lorenzo hesitates, a rare fracture in his composure. Your father? I thought your grandmother raised you. Elena never blinks. She did, after my father was murdered. Feels. The ensuing silence is entirely different, weighing less like fear and more like a tomb. Feels. It is the agonizing weight of stepping past the point of no return. Who exactly was your father? The Don demands, his voice trembling with a sudden desperate hunger. Elena holds the gaze of both men. Feels. Her deepest survival instincts scream in her chest. She spent her childhood absorbing syndicate secrets just to prepare for this terrifying crucible. But the painful truth sets in. She is completely bare now. Vulov saw her face. Feels. The rival patriarch heard her speak the blood ties. There is no quiet exit left. The shadows cannot hide her anymore. Feels. My father was Santino Vitale, she declares, bearing the strength of a martyr. But you probably knew him as the ghost. A devastating revelation. Don Salvatore lets his silver drop, the metallic clatter slicing through the deafening quiet. Feels. The old boss stares as if an apparition just walked through the door, his knuckles turning bone-white against the wood. Santino, the Don gasps, sounding like a man finally drawing breath after drowning for 2 decades. My dearest friend. Feels. My closest counselor. His voice breaks with ancient grief. The man who betrayed you, Lorenzo finishes coldly. Feels. Back in 1985, Lorenzo adds, watching the tragedy unfold in his father's eyes. He never betrayed you, Elena fires back. She had carried this terrible burden her entire life, feels, waiting to face the man who let her father's legacy rot in disgrace. He died keeping your secrets, Don Turi. He died protecting you. Let's sit with this a moment, you and I. Those words shatter the family's entire dark history, feels. Salvatore sits utterly paralyzed. He says nothing, just anchors his trembling hands to the table, taking ragged, weeping breaths, a man dragging himself out of 20 years of suffocating guilt, feels. Lorenzo cuts through the heavy air. That is a dangerous claim, he warns, forcing his features into cold stone. Saying Santino did not betray the family? That rewrites everything. Good men bled out because of 1985. I know the cost, feels. Elena answers softly. Then you know that if you are lying, you will not leave this room breathing. Lorenzo, the Don growls, his voice wrapped in pain. No, father, Lorenzo counters sharply. We need the truth. Vulov has her scent now, feels. The rival soldiers heard her speak the codes. Her quiet life is gone. The target is on her back, feels. She is either our salvation or our ruin, and I need answers tonight. Lorenzo glares, masking his own terror. I will ask this once. What do you hold and how? Elena meets his gaze unflinchingly, feels. She understands the agonizing burden of leadership. He is playing a lethal game of underworld chess, weighing her worth against his father's empire. My grandmother left me the evidence, Elena confesses gently, on her deathbed, feels. She poured a glass of red wine and confessed the tragic truth. Carrying that devastating secret for 18 years was poisoning her soul. What kind of proof? Lorenzo demands, feels. A key? A forgotten vault? My father bled 5 years of his life into a ledger, she explained softly. He traced every dark transaction, knowing a traitor inside your inner circle was feeding the feds, feels. That snake wanted the smuggling routes all to himself. My father was days away from saving you when he was assassinated. A terrible, righteous fury overtakes the dawn. They swore on their lives he took our money and fled to Brazil, feels. He never left the city, Elena whispers, twisting the knife. He rests in Queens, grave 114, buried under a false name so the cartel would not desecrate his bones, feels. She visited that cold stone every Sunday for 30 years, leaving bread and quiet prayers, she adds, her voice breaking. The table falls completely silent. The terrifying patriarch is openly weeping now, hiding his trembling mouth behind his hand, feels. Witnessing a crime family god crumble under the weight of such profound grief alters the very air in the room. Lorenzo gently breaks the heavy spell. Where is the key? Queens, Elena answers, eyes burning with tragic defiance, feels. Sewn into the lining of my winter coat, it opens box 404 on Wall Street, untouched since 1984. Paid for with bakery coins year after painful year, feels. She kept those bank slips hidden in a rusted coffee tin, taking the secret to her grave. Lorenzo leans back, exchanging a silent, devastated look with his father, feels. You and I can almost hear the fatal gears turning in their minds as they realize the war has already begun. We push into Queens tonight, Lorenzo commands. No, we hold, Salvatore murmurs, heavily burdened. Vulov is already hunting, feels. He memorized her face. His killers will be waiting at her door in minutes. Blind rage is a burial ground. The Don shakes his head. We strike at dawn. Lorenzo surveys the dark room, silently calculating the bloodshed ahead, feels. Elena senses the violent storm inside him. He is mapping out the inevitable carnage, a man whose very nature begs to sprint headfirst into the fire. But the profound tragedy of the night anchors him. Dawn it is. We bring the heavy hitters. He stands, feels. Straightening his lapels, observing Elena not as a stranger, but as a deeply scarred survivor he must unravel. In his eyes she is suddenly royalty. You are staying with us tonight, he commands softly, and there is no room for debate in his baritone, feels. I have a bakery shift tomorrow, Elena protests, clinging desperately to her vanishing normal life, feels. Lorenzo studies her for 2 heavy seconds before turning to Arthur, the restaurant manager practically drowning in his own sweat. Hey, Arthur, Lorenzo murmurs, voice smooth as glass. Elena is taking tomorrow off. Arthur nods frantically, feels. 100%, make it permanent, Lorenzo commands. Elena stares down at her discarded apron. She takes one final haunting look around the dining room. 3 years of pouring water, memorizing orders, burying her soul to stay invisible. Feels that safe, quiet illusion is dead. Feels. Tonight, you and I are riding into the dark with them. 3 blacked-out SUVs tear through the midnight city. No radio chatter, just suffocating silence and armed men. Elena sits wedged beside Lorenzo, while Don Salvatore rides shotgun. heels. Eyes boring into the shadows. 20 agonizing minutes pass. Then, without turning, the old Don speaks. Your grandmother baked bread on Thursdays. The whole block smelled that rosemary crust. I used to walk by just to breathe it in, heels. Will this hidden key reveal the traitor, or is this a trap, heels? The tragedy runs deep here. The formidable boss Salvatore confesses that his most lethal enforcer, the legendary Santino Vitale, harbored a quiet, shattering love for Elena's grandmother, heels. A man who could negotiate his way out of a bloodbath melted around a baker's daughter. She chose a humble schoolteacher instead. But when that teacher died, Santino vanished to Brooklyn before the dirt even settled on the grave, heels. Elena sits frozen in the back seat. The man never breathed a word of his agony. He just carried his broken heart into the shadows, heels. Salvatore unveils a devastating truth. For decades he believed his right-hand man betrayed they family. Instead, his most loyal soldier died shielding them, while Salvatore cursed his name to the dirt. Imagine the crushing weight of that guilt. The old man wished that this remorse is a jagged stone lodged in his one he can never swallow. Pure, suffocating agony. Beside him, his son Lorenzo gently taps Elena's arm in the dark, a quiet anchor in a sea of overwhelming sorrow. Heals. That brief touch from Lorenzo holds no romance, just silent solidarity under the crushing tension. He promises they will uncover the truth. Moments later, they arrive at the family estate. It is a sprawling, iron-wrought fortress. Heals. Security cameras watch every angle, while dim lanterns cast long shadows across the cold cobblestones. Elena spent years pouring wine for the wealthy, but this is different. This is syndicate blood money. It looks breathtaking, heals, yet it reeks of ancient power and generations of buried sins. Heals. Inside, an old maid named Maria waits, her eyes carrying the weight of 100 quiet tragedies. Salvatore barks immediate orders to dress Elena properly and burn her cheap waitress uniform. But Elena refuses. She plants her feet in the grand foyer and delivers a stone-cold no. The maid blinks at the sheer defiance. Lorenzo freezes midway up the sweeping staircase. He gazes down at her, visibly torn between dangerous anger and profound respect for her reckless courage. Heals. Elena holds her ground, her voice trembling but unbroken. She tells them the uniform is her anchor. She presses a finger to her cheap plastic name tag, her grandpa's written name on the back, a desperate plea to never forget who she really was in a world of monsters. She declares she is keeping it. The silence in the room turns heavy, almost suffocating. No one speaks. Lorenzo slowly descends the stairs, stepping uncomfortably close, invading her space until the air burns. Heals. They stand so close she can trace the stubble on his jaw. His pitch-black eyes stare right through her soul. Lorenzo finally murmurs, calling her relentlessly stubborn. She fires back, claiming she is just practical. Then Lorenzo twists the knife. He whispers that she sounds exactly like her father. That single sentence shatters her defenses, striking her like a physical blow. The crushing weight of that comparison leaves her entirely breathless. Heals. Look closely at this pain with me. Lorenzo recalls being 12, watching Santino tear apart his father's strategies with bitter truths, and Santino was never wrong. Lorenzo softly explains that in their dark world, the word friend is a blood oath. It means the man you catch a bullet for, or the ghost you are doomed to carry until you die. Elena stares at him, her heart aching as she tries to read the sorrow in his eyes. She finally grasps the agonizing depth of this endless vendetta. Heals. All her life, Elena ran from these men, haunted by the blood they inevitably spilled. Yet, standing in the heart of their fortress, she finally drops the mask of a helpless girl, but the sheer terror of it consumes her. Lorenzo gently tells her to rest before the dawn brings chaos, retreating to give her peace. But there is no sleep for her tonight. She lies awake, staring at the ornate ceiling, listening to the heavy breathing silence of a house built on graves. Heals. The silence is suffocating. No city hum, only the mournful howl of the ocean wind. Her instincts flare, sensing a shadow on the cold balcony. She steps out to find Lorenzo. Jacket gone, tie undone, nursing a glass of dark whiskey while watching the black waves. For a fleeting second, he looks like a broken man, not a ruthless boss. He softly warns her to go inside, mentioning snipers. Snipers? Elena quickly counters, asking why he is risking his own life in the open wide fields. Lorenzo offers a bitter smirk, whispering that he is far too stubborn to die. Elena ignores the biting chill, asking how long he has carried the crushing weight of this empire. Lorenzo strips away his armor. He confesses he took over at 19 years, right after his father's heart failed. He tried to fix a few problems, and the nightmare simply never ended. Then, he asks the fatal question. Before this tragedy consumed her, before the syndicate pulled her into the dark, feels what was her quiet dream for the future? Feels. Elena looks away, her voice fragile. She only wanted to save enough for a small bakery, just like her grandmother's. Lorenzo lets out a whole tragic laugh at the agonizing irony. He maps out the twisted poetry of their bloodlines. Her grandmother fled the syndicate to bake bread. Her father built an empire of corpses to keep her safe. And the heir to all this bloodshed? She just wants to bake. The cruel, cyclical fate of their families is almost too painful to endure. Feels. Lorenzo falls silent, then quietly demands why she hid in the shadows when she held the keys to everything. Elena finally shatters. She confesses how the paranoia mentally destroyed her grandmother. Every ringing phone, feels. Every unfamiliar car parked outside sparked absolute terror. Elena only craved a mundane, invisible life to escape that inherited trauma. But the illusion is dead. The ruthless Vulov has her face, the syndicate knows her name, feels, and her peaceful sanctuary is burned to ash. There is nothing left but survival, feels. Let's ask ourselves, you and I, what remains for her now? Elena whispers that she is merely breathing on borrowed time. Lorenzo studies her, a dark reverence in his gaze. He murmurs that she sacrificed her perfect cover just to save a dying old man. Where cowards hide, she stepped into the crossfire. But he warns her softly that she is terrified of the wrong ghosts. When she asks what she should truly fear, Lorenzo's voice drops to a chilling whisper. Me. Is he her savior or her executioner? Feels. Lorenzo hesitates, the mask slipping just a fraction. I don't know yet, he confesses, thing I can tell you the cold air. Elena offers a weary, brave smirk. Good. Dishonest men are boring, and against all odds, Lorenzo truly smiles. Feels. Not the calculated grin of a crime lord, but the smile of a deeply tired, lonely man. For a heartbeat, he is entirely human, but their shattered world never allows peace. His radio violently crackles to life. Talk, he orders. Feels. A panicked voice floods the channel. Boss, movement in Queens, Vulov's cars, they breached 20 minutes ago. Feels. The warmth vanishes. The ruthless boss who carried the syndicate on his teenage shoulders returns. Contain it, Lorenzo commands. No shooting, just watch. We move at 5. He turns a dark stare to Elena. They are tearing apart your apartment. Feels. Elena doesn't flinch. The key isn't there. Oh, pauses. You said you sewed it into your coat. I know what I said. Lorenzo simply stares, a profound realization dawning. Where is it? Slowly, Elena reaches down. She is still wearing those battered, heels, non-slip Waitress shoes. The same worn-out sneakers she walked in every single day. The only thing that never betrayed her. Heels. She bends down, unlaces that left shoe, and tears the heel back. Hidden inside the rubber, wrapped in her grandmother's wax paper, rests a tiny silver key. Lorenzo just stares. 3 agonizing seconds of dead air. Heels. Then he lets out this hollow sound. Half laugh, half groan, burying his face in his hands. You lied. Elena just shrugs. My grandma taught me, never keep your diamonds in the jewelry box. It is the first thing they steal. Lorenzo drops his hand, feels, looking at her like she is from another world. It is the helpless shock of a hardened man realizing he is playing checkers, while she has been 3 steps ahead all along. Feels. Your grandma, Lorenzo says, it's dead serious, was a terrifying woman. She was a baker, Elena snaps. She baked bread and kept receipts. Lorenzo pulls in a ragged breath. He eyes the key, grabs his radio, and makes the call. Okay, new plan. Feels. Vulov's men are tearing your apartment apart for a key sitting right here. They think they are winning, which gives us a window. He squares his shoulders. You trust me? Elena doesn't even blink. I trust our goals align right now, she answers. Feels. That works, Lorenzo nods. Feels. Listen closely. This is where the night turns bitter. That works, he agrees, radioing his men. 8 minutes later, they are moving. Elena sits in her worn work uniform, clutching her grandmother's note like a fragile shield. Feels. Lorenzo is strapped in tactical gear beneath his tailored suit. As heavy trucks tear through the black city streets, Elena just sits in the shadows. She squeezes the cold key, haunted by a father buried under a stolen name. Feels. The agonizing truth of his life sits locked away inside a Wall Street bank, waiting to be dragged into the light. Feels. 20 years is a heavy lifetime to carry a ghost. The metal key burns her palm when crack. A sniper's bullet shatters the truck's back window. The convoy violently scatters. Get down, Feels. Lorenzo tackles Elena to the floorboards before the broken glass even settles. He shields her trembling frame with his own, weapon drawn, running on pure, violent instinct. Feels. The driver screams coordinates over the radio as backup cars swerve into defensive formation. Give me a count. How many? Lorenzo snaps into his earpiece, his voice freezing cold. Heels. 3 cars. Sniper on the roof. They were waiting, boss. Total setup. Lorenzo clenches his jaw. He looks down at Elena in the dark. You'd expect tears, right? Not a chance. Her breathing is steady. She is scanning the shadows, surviving the nightmare. Heels. You good? He asks softly. Ask me when we stop catching bullets, she whispers back. A grim smile crosses his face. Stay down. Do not move. The truck violently swerves as 2 more bullets tear through the roof. Volov wants them breathing. Heels. A dead body is a mess but a living hostage. That is pure leverage. Heels. Realizing this dark truth buys them 40 seconds of life. 2 blocks out, the driver yells. Lorenzo cuts him off. Do not push through. They hold the front. Rip it into the market alley. Now. The truck drifts. Heels. Plunging into a narrow street packed with mourning vendors. Absolute, blinding chaos. Panicked screams instantly swallow the heavy vehicles. Lorenzo pulls Elena up. We ditch the car, stick to me, head down. They bail into the cold air. Heels. Melting into the terrified crowd while his men form a shield. Elena mirrors his every step. Her aching soul knows that falling behind means a lonely, forgotten death. Heels. Her grandmother prepared her well for survival. They run 3 agonizing blocks before Lorenzo's radio crackles. Boss, her apartment is swarming. Lorenzo locks heavy eyes with Elena. They are tearing your life apart. Haven't found it yet. Heels. They never will, she whispers. I know, Lorenzo murmurs, watching her desperate grip on the key. But that is not our curse tonight. We must reach Wall Street, and Volov has every roadblock tight. He touches his earpiece. Marco. Heels. Find me a ghost route to the bank now. Heels. No bridges. No tunnels. Give me something. Heavy silence. Marco finally speaks. The river. 20 minutes by water gets us there. Lock it in, Lorenzo commands. We move in 5. Elena stares through the shadows. I have options, he replies. You casually have a boat? A fragile smile touches her lips, but then agonizing reality crashes back in. Violent men are destroying her sanctuary. My photos, she whispers, heartbroken. My grandmother's old recipes. Heels. All in a notebook on the shelf. Lorenzo looks at her. He feels the profound tragedy of losing her past, but offers no false hope. We will come back for the important things, he murmurs. And if they burn it, then we rewrite it from memory. Heels. His voice drops into a firm, heavy comfort, a man guiding a broken soul through the darkest night. You still carry her lessons, right up here? He taps his temple. They cannot steal that. She nods, gripping the key like a lifeline. Heels. Following him into the shadows. The boat ride across the Black River is freezing and fast. Elena sits against the biting wind, consumed by her father's vendetta. Heels. Let us reflect on that tragedy together, you and I. She only knew her father through old stories and a rusted key. A ghost who spent 5 years burying truth in a city of lies, only to be murdered before he could strike the match. Now, Heels. She crosses black water to finish his war. Takes a quiet kind of strength, doesn't it? They hit the dark Manhattan docks, met by 2 silent enforcers. They move through the hollow, abandoned financial district, footsteps echoing off cold concrete. Heels. The towering bank sits in absolute darkness. Lorenzo checks his silver watch, giving a slow nod to a massive shadow guarding the side door. Heels. Mr. Castellano, Lorenzo murmurs, smooth as ice. Tell me you brought the manager. He is inside, the guard replies. Very cooperative. Elena does not ask how a bank manager becomes cooperative at 4 in the morning. Heels. She is finally waking up to the agonizing truth. A shadow city breathes under the streets since midnight to dawn. A world fueled by blood money and ancient fear. She served these same men dinner for years, entirely blind to the beast. Heels. The underground vault smells of cold dust and buried secrets. A trembling, pale manager leads them down the quiet corridor, staring desperately at the floor. Heels. Lorenzo slides his key into box 404, stepping back. Elena's trembling hand pushes her silver key home. A heavy click echoes. Lorenzo sets the metal box sounds. 20 years of agonizing silence breathes in that room. Elena slowly pries the lid open. No diamonds, just a battered old ledger and a single cassette tape. And then the quiet heartbreak. The handwriting. She recognizes her father's rushed scrawl instantly, a haunting memory from one faded birthday card. Heels. His writing is painfully small. She brushes the tape, paralyzed by the emotional weight. Lorenzo flips open the worn ledger, scanning decades of hidden sins suddenly. His entire body freezes. Elena. His voice cracks, his cold armor completely shattered. Look at this. He pushes the heavy book toward her, pointing to a rigid column of initials and dates: 1983, 1984, 1985. Feels. Beside the date sits a haunting trail of shipment numbers and one name. D.V. Vulov, Lorenzo whispers. But look right here. Elena leans closer. Her father had frantically documented FBI meetings, locations, and federal initials. The betrayal is utterly suffocating. At the bottom, underlined twice in plain English against the mob dialect, rests one chilling sentence. Her voice trembles. He will blame the ghost when the time comes. The ghost already knows. Feels. The ghost prepared the answer. If you read this, the answer found you. Heavy silence fills the vault. Lorenzo watches her undone. Your father knew, he whispers. He knew Vulov would frame him. He built this puzzle. He taps the page. As a message for you. Her voice shatters. He died 3 weeks after I was born. Lorenzo never wavers. He knew you would be here. Feels. He knew she would protect the key. He wrote this tragedy for whoever came looking, for you. Feel the chill in that room? She presses her hand against her father's faded ink. She locks the agonizing grief away, her eyes hardening with pure vengeance. The tape. We need a player. Marco has one at the safe house, Lorenzo replies gently, wrapping the fragile ledger to carry into the long, dark night. Feels. Step into the dark together. Is cold, but this revenge just got deeply personal. His radio hisses. Boss, Marco warns, massive problem. Vulov called an emergency meeting tonight at the Gilded Obsidian. Lorenzo freezes. He knows we have the box, he murmurs. Marco agrees. They found the empty apartment. He knows Elena is with you. Feels. Vulov wants to twist the story before the truth bleeds out. Lorenzo studies Elena, his mind running cold logic. He stares at her humble waitress uniform. He is heading to the Gilded Obsidian, Lorenzo smirks. Then so are we. His gaze pierces her. Every boss Vulov betrayed in 1985 will be there. Every man who lost his freedom because that rat sold them out. Feels. Drop this evidence and Vulov is dead. Elena frowns. He will have an army. He will say, we faked the ledger. Lorenzo stares into her eyes. Exactly. That is why you dropped the bomb. Not me. You, the ghost's daughter, speaking their old dialect. It is a tragically beautiful trap. They will believe an innocent waitress long before a rival hungry for power. Feels. Elena lets the silence linger. For 3 years, she was a phantom pouring wine and absorbing their darkest sins. She pictures her father's frantic handwriting. She recalls her grandmother pressing that key into her palm, pushing her into the abyss, whispering, remember the name I gave you. A cold, heavy resolve settles in her chest. She looks up. I will need my uniform pressed, she whispers softly. Feels. Lorenzo nods. Done. Vulov has no idea his Reaper walks through those kitchen doors tonight. Inside the dim safe house, they press play on an old cassette recorder. Tape hisses, but the voices cut through the thick static. It is Santino Vitali. A crushing wave hits Elena. She has never heard her dead father's voice before this very second. Feels. She thought a simple tape could not break her. She was wrong. His voice is deep, measured, thick, with that old country dialect. A heartbreaking realization hits her. She sounds exactly like him. She covers her trembling mouth. He is speaking to a nervous FBI handler. The agent states the date, November 14th, 1984, 10 short months before they murdered him. Feels. The recording is a graveyard of secrets. Santino confesses everything. Names, dates, smuggling routes. He details how Vulov traded loyalty for federal immunity, listing every rival family destroyed. Then comes the agonizing truth. He names the day Vulov decided Santino knew too much. He will move against me within the year, her father says, his voice hauntingly calm. He knew his own boss was planning his execution. Feels. I am making this recording as insurance. I refuse federal protection. I have a daughter arriving in 3 months. The tape clicks off. A suffocating silence falls. Markov exhales. That is enough to bury him. Lorenzo crosses his arms, dark fury radiating from his bones. That is enough to bury him 10 times over. His cold eyes are already digging Vulov's grave. Feels. The tragedy is staggering. Every boss locked up in 85 because Vulov snitched. Lorenzo watches her. Vulov used the feds to clear rivals, making your father the perfect sacrifice. Elena understands now. Frame the consigliere. Let the feds clean house. Take the crown. Lorenzo scowls. He has ruled a stolen empire for 2 decades. Elena simply stares at the tape. A father's final, desperate gift. Feels. You and I are watching a beautifully agonizing payback unfold. Elena understands now. Her father's love was hidden ledgers and hard evidence to ensure her survival. She clutches the tape, ready to burn their world. She asks when dinner begins. Marco says 8. Vulov arrives at 7:30. The snake always slithers in early. Eels. Elena envisions a flawless, dangerous entrance. They will strike at 7:45, slipping through the kitchen doors. She touches her faded name tag. She wants to stand over Vulov before his mind even registers her presence. A quiet, terrifying power. Lorenzo stares, mesmerized. He whispers, "It is either pure brilliance or pure suicide." Elena softly replies, "It can be both." A dangerous smirk crosses Lorenzo's face. Eels. The war machinery turns. Lorenzo tells Marco to prep the hitmen. Chef waits for infiltrators, sealing every act before Vulov arrives. Marco asks about Salvatore. Lorenzo says his father will play the broken lion. He will sit there, carrying the heavy grief of 20 years. They spend hours weaving this trap. While Lorenzo plans the bloodshed, Elena sits quietly, carving the Mafia ledger into her soul. Eels. She burns every date and dirty payout into her memory. Later, Lorenzo slides a coffee across the table. His eyes are heavy. He warns her that if Vulov falls tonight, there is a devastating cost. He delivers the cold truth. Her shield is gone. Her true identity will be exposed forever. Eels. The underworld will know Santino's daughter survived, holding their sins. Her quiet, invisible life will burn. Lorenzo searches her eyes, asking what she desires when the smoke clears. Elena drifts away for a heartbeat. She dreams of reclaiming her family's forgotten vineyard in Sicily. A peaceful existence, leaving this ocean of blood far behind. Eels. She just wants to live without hiding. Then, Lorenzo shatters her world. He reveals his father bought that Sicilian estate decades ago, driven by agonizing guilt. It belongs to her. Elena is paralyzed. Lorenzo admits his father spent 23 years searching the city, haunted by Santino's final dimension of a child. He simply couldn't find her. Eels. Fate has a cruel sense of humor. She found him instead. For 3 years, she poured wine for the monsters who slaughtered her family. You cannot outrun your past. Instead of shattering under the grief, she hardens her heart. She tells Lorenzo it is time to walk into the fire. Lorenzo nods softly. He carries the deep emotional weight of his bloodline. Knowing tonight demands cold, ruthless focus. Eels. He holds her hand for 3 fleeting seconds before standing to ignite the war. Inside the restaurant, anxiety suffocates the air. The staff bleeds sweat, perfecting the night for the city's deadliest predators. The lighting is mournful. Suddenly, Elena pushes through the kitchen doors at 7:22, wearing her faded waitress uniform. The head chef stares at her like a phantom just materialized. Eels. Benoit stammers she was fired. Elena silences him, demanding bread and oil. She locks eyes, delivering a chilling omen. No matter the screams tonight, the staff must hide. Benoit trembles, asking who she is. A dark smile graces her lips. She is just the waitress. She grabs her tray, pushing open the doors to the packed dining room. Eels. The apex predators pour in, claiming their velvet thrones. Elena drifts among them like a ghost, pouring wine. Head bowed, she waits for the architect of her pain. Vulov finally swaggers in at 7:34, his shadows flooding the room. He wears the smug arrogance of a man who believes he owns the underworld. He claims the center table while his hounds lock down the walls. Eels. Vulov's blinding ego makes the waitresses invisible. Lorenzo knew his arrogance perfectly. Then Salvatore enters. The old Don appears utterly shattered, crushed by his murdered friend's tape. He slumps at his table in tragic silence. A suffocating tension chokes the room instantly. From the shadows, Elena watches Vulov laugh at a cruel joke, carelessly downing his vodka. Eels. Vulov sits there, drowning in false victory. But you and I know the storm is already inside. Lorenzo's executioners wait outside. Marco has sealed the exits. Elena carries her father's voice in her pocket, their sin strapped to her chest. She remembers his fearless, calm words. Gathering her tragic grief, she grips the tray. She marches to Vulov's table and shatters the quiet, slamming the bread down. A beautiful, unspeakable defiance. Eels. She forces him to look at the bread, breaking his focus. Vulov glances up. It takes 2 agonizing seconds for the ghost of this girl to register. You can see the panic setting in. Elena stares him down, dead cold, announcing dinner is served from Santino Vitali. She lifts the silver cover. No food. Just the ledger, the recorder, and a dead fish. Pure, cold-blooded payback. Eels. Vulov goes pale as a corpse, hands trembling. Elena steps back, letting her voice drift across the heavy silence. She speaks a quiet line in Old Italian. The toll of the traitor, the room freezes. Think about the weight of that moment with me. Every seasoned mob boss at those tables felt the cold edge of her words. Eels. The air completely died when she pointed straight at the man who destroyed her bloodline. She laid bare the betrayal, how he sold their roots to the feds back in 1983, how he murdered Santino Vitali just to bury the truth. Eels. 20 years of living on stolen time. Vulov shot to his feet, demanding her death, but nobody even blinked. Then the kitchen's doors swung wide. Lorenzo stepped through with a shotgun and 6 hitters. Waiters dropped their trays, raising their weapons. Eels. The trap snapped shut in an instant. Eels. The crime syndicate sat in utter silence. Lorenzo handed the recorder to Caruso, a boss who lost 14 months of his life to a federal cage back in 1986. Lorenzo told him to press play. He laid out the timeline. A tape from November 14, 1984. Santino speaking to the feds, dropping Dmitry Vulov's name 12 times. Caruso stared at the machine, locked eyes with the traitor, and slammed the button. The voice of a ghost filled the room. Eels. Elena watched the color drain from the man who ruined her life. You could almost hear his mind fracturing as he realized a dead man had been haunting his legacy since 1984. The ruthless kingpin finally tasted the agonizing helplessness of his victims. But Elena felt no joy in it, only a profound, quiet peace, like a suffocating chain had finally snapped. When the ghost ceased speaking, Caruso simply slammed the recorder against the dark wood of the table. Eels. Caruso stared into Vulov's eyes. It was not anger, just a crushing disappointment realizing he sacrificed his freedom for a rat. He quietly asked, looked down at the loaded guns, then at Elena, standing resolute in the center of the storm. He whispered that it was only business, his fate was sealed. Then the elder Don, Salvatore, stood up. He limped slowly across the marble, stopping before Elena, looking at her as if his long-lost brother had returned. Eels. Salvatore pulled a steak knife from the table and offered it to her, telling her to take her vengeance for Santino. Elena looked at the steel, remembering that lonely fake grave in Queens. She thought of her grandmother paying $50 a year for 3 decades just to keep this truth breathing in the dark. She took the handle, raised it, and drove the blade deep into the heavy mahogany. The violent thud echoed through the room, silencing every breathing soul. Eels. Sometimes real power is just walking away. Elena looked at them and declared she was no butcher. She carried the true Vitali blood too pure to stain with the life of a traitor. She met the eyes of every hardened killer in that room, men who finally saw the truth and told them the rat was theirs to handle. She turned her back on Vulov and walked toward Lorenzo behind her. The room exploded into a symphony of chaos as 5 crime families claimed their bloody vengeance. Eels. She never even flinched at the sounds of destruction. Sometimes, to survive the tragedy, you just have to leave the fire behind. Lorenzo caught her in his arms, holding on to her like she might slip away into the night. He whispered that the nightmare was finally over. Listening to ruthless men finally speak her father's name with honor, she felt the vault key heavy in her pocket. But she told Lorenzo they were not finished yet. One last emotional debt had to be paid. Eels. She looked toward Salvatore, an old man who seemed to have just woken from a 20-year curse. She whispered that she needed to show him where his best friend was truly buried. 6 the next morning, they arrived at St. Michael's Cemetery in Queens, just the 4 of them walking the silent grounds. They stopped at a forgotten stone in row 7, bearing a stranger's name, Eels. The weathered stone read Giovanni Ferraro, 1948 to 1985. Beloved and remembered had chosen those words to hide a painful truth in plain sight, because Santino Vitali truly was beloved.
Elena stood still.
She had only stood in this quiet place 3 times, always right as dawn broke. She knew every crack in that cold stone, every uneven patch of soil.
The agonizing weight
Of that false grave was as familiar to her as her own blood. Eels. The tired boss leaned heavily on his cane, staring at the lie carved in stone. He suddenly grasped the agonizing toll of hiding a loved one for 30 years. Salvatore stood in the dead silence, and Elena let him drown in it, knowing that cemetery quiet is just how we speak to ghosts. Finally, his voice cracked in the cold air as he spoke Santino's name. His ruthless armor melted away, leaving only a broken man confessing he swallowed a lie for 2 decades. Eels. He confessed to the earth that tearing down his best friend's legacy was the darkest sin of his life. He spoke to the dirt, telling Santino that his daughter was standing right here, carrying his eyes and her grandmother's unbreakable spirit. He called her the bravest soul alive for facing a room full of loaded guns. As he begged his old friend for forgiveness, Elena felt a lifetime of suffocating grief wash away. She reached out, pressing her bare palm against the freezing stone. Feels. She whispered a promise to the earth. She would return with a new stone, carved with his real name, so the world would finally know his truth. Driving away in the morning light, Salvatore sat in the passenger seat, completely silent. But halfway across the Brooklyn Bridge, the old man reached back and gently squeezed Elena's knee. Coming from a hardened underworld king, that quiet gesture carried the weight of 1,000 apologies. It said everything a broken man couldn't. Feels. We must ask ourselves, what is the true cost of vengeance? Elena held his hand as they crossed the water, finally finding her peace. The real-world fallout was violently swift. When 5 syndicates want you gone, you simply vanish. Vulov's entire empire evaporated into thin air within 72 hours. Betrayed by his own bloodline, his lieutenants ran straight to the authorities to save themselves. The poetic tragedy of absolute karma. Feels. The aftershocks of that night ripped through the city. Corrupt agents lost badges and pensions in the blink of an eye. The docks were reclaimed, and working men finally saw the money stolen from their hands. And Volov? Feels. Elena never even asked how his story ended. She had left him pinned to a table in a room full of hungry wolves. For her, that dark chapter was closed. Lorenzo's attorneys moved like ghosts through the legal system. In just 2 weeks, Feels. Elena claimed her rightful inheritance, $52 million, a quiet, dusty vineyard resting in Palermo, and most importantly, a spotless legal identity, finally worthy of the heavy legacy she had carried in the shadows her entire life. Feels. Picture it with me. A quiet Tuesday morning in the Hamptons. Elena sat over coffee, scanning a dark inheritance. Her new Mafia legacy. She absorbed every sin, shut the folder, and looked up. Lorenzo was watching her with that heavy, piercing gaze. Feels. Just trying to read her soul. Well, he asked softly. She did not miss a beat. The dock workers' fund. Transfer it in today, not tomorrow now. Lorenzo hesitated. Elena, that is $11 million. She did not blink. I know exactly where it comes from. Feels, she said. I know the families who buried sons in '85 because of a rat. Feels. Those men took the hardest hit. They get paid first, she told him, her voice steady. Then the Ridgewood School, then the hospital. We will figure out the rest. Lorenzo just watched her. What about the Palermo vineyard? The deed transferred Friday. Feels. Elena nodded slowly. I know nothing has grown there in 20 years, Lorenzo pressed her. The farmhouse is a ruin, Elena. The roof is completely caved in. She just stared back. It was that cold, unbreakable look she carried now. Feels. The kind of silence that kills an argument dead without a single word. Feels. Lorenzo surrendered to the silence. I know what I am choosing, Elena whispered. I want the dirt, the sweat. I want to plant something clean, knowing no blood paid for the soil. She let out a breath. I want to bake bread where the wind smells like lemons. Feels. That is everything to me. Lorenzo stood and walked over to her. As she looked up, the morning light hit his face, stripping away the monster. This was the real man beneath the Mafia myth. The quiet ghost who only haunted lonely kitchens, rainy cars, Feels, and quiet graves. Feels. I met with the commission yesterday, he told her. I said the war is over. The Moretti family is going completely illegitimate. He reached inside his jacket. I told them the Prince of New York is walking away. Elena froze. You really said that? Feels. I meant it. And then with that aching, heavy sincerity he carried, Lorenzo sank down to one knee. He opened a velvet box. Inside sat an antique 1920s platinum ring, a quiet survivor just like the two of them. My grandmother's, he murmured. Feels. She always said the best things grow from the oldest dirt. Feels. Elena looked from the ring to the man holding it. This was the same guy who threw himself off a roof to save her life. The man who walked her through a bleeding city. The boss who stood by a grave and bared his soul. The king who watched her burn his empire to the ground and still looked at her like royalty. I'm done being a Don, Lorenzo whispered. It wasn't just a soft tone this time. It was the raw, broken truth of a man surrendering. I want to be a husband, Feels. I want to wake up in Palermo, he pleaded. I want to rebuild that roof. I want to fail at growing grapes. I want our home to smell like your grandmother's kitchen. He looked at her, stripped of all his armor. Elena Vitali, let me be the man you never have to hide from. Elena closed her eyes. She remembered being 7, listening to midnight whispers. The hidden key, her father's tape, the fake names on cold tombstones. The ghosts were quiet now. Her real legacy was just beginning. Feels. Elena answered in the only way that made sense for this beautiful tragedy. Tu sei l'aria che respiro, she whispered. You are the air I breathe. A genuine, unguarded smile broke across Lorenzo's face, shattering the ruthless boss forever. Heels. Is that a yes? He asked softly. Yes, she laughed. And friends, let me tell you, that sound was pure freedom. You could actually feel 2 decades of agonizing trauma washing away in the morning light. He pulled her in, and the tension broke. Heels. Somewhere in the room, Arthur was weeping, and Marco was leading the cheers. Heels. In the corner, Don Talvercor quietly bread. Their world, bread was all around. 3 months later, the scene shifts. Elena stands inside a stone farmhouse in Palermo, hands dusted with flour, feels the sweet lemon wind pulling at the curtains. Outside, Lorenzo is cursing at a broken roof, realizing redemption takes real sweat. The vineyard is just dirt and hope. Inside, Elena leans over a wooden table, reading her grandmother's recipe book. Feels. Not the original, the mob burned that one in Queens, hunting for ghosts. Feels. Elena was rewriting it entirely from memory. Every measurement restored perfectly by a mind that never forgot a detail. She had all the time in the world now. Pressing her flour-dusted hand to the paper, she left a white print, a signature, Heels, exactly like her grandmother's. Proof she was tethered to a bloodline of survivors who fled the mountains. You and I both know she didn't find love and justice by accident, Heels. She earned her peace because an old woman hid a key in a coffee can for 30 years, left bread on a fake grave, and whispered dark secrets to a child who absorbed it all. Heels. That old forgotten language was breathing again. The bread was warm. The endless toxic cycle of Mafia bloodshed was finally broken. And the real feast? It was just beginning.